Mike Cook from Strategic Information Group, and we will be starting momentarily. We have a few more people joining the call, and we will start up in a minute or so. So thanks for attending today. Hey, David, are you out there?
Yep, I am here. So whenever you're ready to get started, a couple minutes after.
All right. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining today. We're pretty excited from a Strategic Information Group standpoint to have one of our best partners in ACOM on the line here today. So we're going to go over paperless vendor payments and some exciting things you could do to improve your efficiency and have better customer relationships and all the things that you're trying to do to streamline your business. We're going to touch on a few of those things today. Again, I'm Mike Cook. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Strategic, and I'd like to introduce David Adams. He's the Business Development Manager for ACOM Solutions. ACOM has been a partner with QAD since 1996, and Strategic has you beat by about 4 years. So we've been partners since 1992, and combined, we just bring a great offering to you today. So with that, from a standpoint, you do have access to chat. So if you do have questions, we'd be happy to answer any of your chat questions. So you should have a dialog box on the right-hand side, and then also there's a poll that's going to be given today, so you can answer that on the right-hand side as well. So with no further ado, I'd like to give way to David Adams.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and we'll get started. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk a little bit about the market itself, the payables market, what's wrong with the traditional payment process. So, what's wrong with the way that a lot of companies are still printing paper checks and doing those payments. We'll go into what the paperless pay solution is by ACOM, how it actually works, then I'll talk a little bit about ACOM Solutions itself, and then we'll close up. And as Mike mentioned, if you have questions, please feel free to enter them into the question box and go to webinar or the chat box, and we'll answer them at the end. So first, let's start with the market. Most companies are really still dealing with very inefficient payment methods. They're still relying on paper checks, and this is typical for a lot of companies. So a 2015 American Financial Professionals survey that was done indicated that 79% of companies are actually actively looking to convert their paper checks to electronic payments. There's a lot of reasons why that's happening, but the main reason is that it's much more expensive to do a paper check. You can think about everything that goes into printing those checks, the paper itself, the equipment cost, the maintenance cost, the toner cost, the labor cost, the mailing cost. There's so many things that are involved in generating a paper check. So most studies show that it's 10 times more costly, with the average cost of sending a paper check around $6. And then again, just thinking about the actual process itself to printing a check, it's a big headache, because if the printer jams, you have to deal with the paper, and you might have to go ahead and void the check. You may have to deal with the bursting of the checks, the stuffing of the checks, the mailing of the checks. So it's just a lot of headaches involved with printing paper checks. Now, another study from American Financial Professionals dealt with fraud, and what this survey found was 62% of companies were actually targets of payment fraud. And as it relates to that fraud, 77% were related to check fraud. So checks, being very insecure, really, the ability of somebody to get a hold of a check, very easy to change the payee name or change the amount. So it is a lot of fraud opportunity when you're using paper checks. 45% of those losses were related to checks, and that compares to about 7% on the electronic ACH payment side and 2% for corporate debit cards. So that's just showing that really it's much more secure to use a form of electronic payment as it is, as opposed to using a paper form of payment. So what's the holdup? You know, we look at this and say, okay, it's much more efficient to go to electronic payment. So why aren't many more companies actually making this transition? This really deals with the time and the effort that's required to transition your vendor community. You have to ask them, or sometimes even force them to make that change. A lot of companies are set in their ways and they want to receive a paper check and they don't want to make change. So you have to actually go to your vendors and make them do those things. You've got to try and sell or explain the benefits of electronic payments. I mean, there are a lot of benefits, of course, for you, the company, but there's also a lot of benefits for the vendors themselves, but that has to be explained. And then there's a lot of paperwork involved, because when you get the vendors to actually make that move to electronic payments, you've got to deal with the paperwork and agreements to get that done. And then, of course, on your side, there's an investment in the technology that's required to generate those electronic payments. So these are the major reasons why a lot of companies, of course, would love to do this, but there's a holdup or there's a delay in how they can actually get this to be implemented. So let's take a minute and talk about the traditional payment process. But before I do that, let me launch my first polling question here. And you should see the poll. Basically, it's just talking about how many AP payments do you process monthly. And if you could take a minute and just answer that poll, I greatly appreciate it. I see you're bringing them in here. And just a minute more here. Looks like we're just about done. Great. Looks like everybody's voted. I appreciate that. So it looks like the majority of you folks, just to give you kind of a high-level overview, the majority are doing less than 500 checks per month. About 36% are doing between 500 and 1,000, and a small percentage are doing more than 2,000 payments a month. So let's talk now about the traditional payment mix here of what's normally happening with companies that are doing payments. So with this, what we find is that the majority is no surprise. The majority of companies are still doing paper checks. That's about 80 to 90%. ACH, which is a very common form of electronic payment in the United States, that's hovering around 10 to 20%. Wires, which might be international wires, are around 5 to 10%. And P cards, which are basically those electronic or those credit card payments, are very low at around somewhere below 10%. So this is a traditional mix of what companies are doing now when they're processing their payments. So some of the challenges when you're doing this traditional process is that, as we mentioned before, printing checks is extremely expensive, about $6 per check. It's very manual and it's very inefficient. You have to, as I mentioned, you have to manage the check stock, the supplies, the printing process itself, the ability to go get the check stock, put it into the printer, process those checks. Once they print, the ability to take them out, do the post-processing. I have to fold them, burst them, and fold them. Got to put them in the envelopes. I have to do the postage, and I have to send them out to be mailed. And then you have the issue of lost or stolen checks, and that's where we get into the check fraud and the exposure of the actual paper checks. Again, since paper checks are 80 to 90% of what most companies are doing, there's a huge fraud exposure with most companies in their current payment process. So this slide talks about how do you assess your current AP process. So for you as a company, first thing you look at, okay, is it cost efficient or cost effective? Is it secure? Will I have control over my cash flow? Is it automated? And then will the vendors accept it? So as we've been saying, a lot of the payment procedures or processes are being done with paper checks. So that's probably not very cost efficient. It's not very secure. With paper checks, you don't have a great control over your cash flow. It's not very automated, and the vendor certainly will accept it, though. But again, the other four things are really at your, are really at a disadvantage. I just want to make sure I have this polling question is closed here. There we go. We'll continue on here. So some of the top 10% And the key challenges that companies have when they're trying to move to electronic payments is the ability to still have to deal with checks. Even though they're getting some of their vendors to go to ACH or some form of electronic payment, you still have to deal with those vendors that won't actually take an electronic payment, so you'll still have to process those paper checks. You've got to update the vendor information and that banking information. So as companies are coming on and they do want to go to electronic payments, somebody's got to manage the onboarding of those vendors and get them converted to electronic payments, and there's agreements and paperwork that goes along with that. And that's managing the new vendors as well as they come on, and then keeping them up to date as things change. And for people that are doing wires or those credit card payments today, most of the companies are still doing it in a manual fashion, where you might actually be going to the bank's website and initiating that process, which allows you to do the electronic payment, but of course that's not very efficient at all. So this graph talks about the traditional payment options and kind of how they rate and how they show up. So if we start with paper checks, you can see on this chart, the cost of paper check printing is very high. As we talked about before, exposure to fraud is very high. Your cash management control is very low, because when you think about it, when you generate a paper check and you mail it to somebody, you have no idea when it's going to be cashed. There's very low automation, and the vendor acceptance is high, though. So checks are still the most popular form of payment out there. For ACH printing, or processing, which is the electronic payment, a lot of companies do it, but they're still doing it manual, meaning, again, they might initiate the payment at the bank's website. So the cost of that is low. The fraud exposure is better than paper checks, so it's in the medium range. You have good control of cash management because you're initiating the payment when you decide you want to make that payment. There's still very low automation, because if you're doing it manually at the bank's website, you still have to go in there and manually create that payment. And the vendor acceptance of ACH is pretty good. It's in the middle, so it's in the midsection. Foreign wires, this would be your electronic foreign wires. The cost is very expensive for those typically. Fraud exposure is very low. Cash management, again, is high because you can control when you initiate those payments. Automation is low because they're still being done manually. And the vendor acceptance typically on foreign wires is low. P cards, which are basically credit card payments, the cost is low. Fraud exposure is similar to ACH. It's in the midsection here. You have very good control of cash management, because just like with the wires and the ACH, you can control when those payments are actually released. The automation is somewhat low for most of the P cards, because again, you're manually initiating those transactions, and the vendor acceptance is kind of right in the middle there. So this is just a breakdown of the four traditional payment methods and kind of how they classify against each other. So let's talk now a little bit about the ACOM paperless pay solution. Before I do that, though, let's go ahead and I'm going to launch my last polling question here. And let me just go ahead and bring this one in. And you should see this one. It's basically, this is asking what percentage of your payments are going to be electronic at this point in your business. So if you can answer that poll, I'd greatly appreciate it. See, the answers are coming in here, so just another minute or so. Like about 75% have answered, so we're almost there. Okay, so I've got all the results, and this is very typical. It looks like the majority of folks, 91% of the companies that are here today, less than 20% of the payments are electronic. 9% of the companies here are somewhere between 20 to 40% being electronic. So that is very typical for most companies. As we talked about in the slides prior, the majority of payments are still done in paper, with a small percentage that are done electronically. So the goal, obviously, is to get more of your vendors to accept an electronic payment. So let's talk a little bit about the ACOM solution itself. So basically the goal, as I was just saying, is to get rid of as many paper checks as possible. The program that we have is guaranteed to convert at least 75% of the payments that you're doing to electronic payment method. So whether it be an ACH or a credit card payment or some form of electronic payment. Some of your vendors are still going to want checks, so we have an option within our program that we'll actually do the printing of the checks for you, and we'll mail them. So basically that would get you 100% elimination of paper checks if you chose to have us do the remaining payments that are checks. And this program, if you qualify, is 100% free, and I'll explain how that's going to be free as we go through the presentation. So the transition, some of the key elements. So why is it so hard to get your vendors to actually move to electronic payments? you really need to offer a wide variety of payment options. The more payment options that you offer, the better chances you're going to get some of your vendors to move to some form of electronic payment. So that's things like you want to offer ACH payments, virtual cards, financial EDI, ACH, CTX, wires, all the different options. And that way, one of the options hopefully will satisfy your vendor. The second issue is handling the payment advice. Even for companies today that are currently doing electronic payments, many of them are still manually handling the payment advice. So they might be printing it out and emailing it, or maybe they're printing it and faxing it, and then, or maybe even taking it and put it in an envelope and mailing it. And this kind of defeats the purpose of doing an electronic payment if you have to, handle the advice manually. And then the other piece really is the vendor outreach, and this is the challenge. It's going to be hard to get the word out that you're now offering electronic payments, and it's a lot of work. So most AP departments just don't have the resources or the expertise to do this. So the ACOM paperless pay solution attacks basically the three key elements that we just discussed. First, on the technology side, the technology needed to issue the electronic payments is going to be part of the solution, and that includes the multiple payment options. Remember, like ACH, credit card payments, wires, those types of things. There's also a vendor portal where vendors can check the status of their payments and look up and view payment history. The second part of the solution is the vendor outreach. This is the ability to take all the payment options to your vendors. We have a dedicated team that's going to contact 100% of your vendors. There's no work on your side, and this is all going to be done by ACOM. And we'll craft messages to your vendors based on your input. And this will be done with phone calls to your vendors, emails, letters, and you have complete control and approval really of all the aspects of the program. So we'll be performing this on your behalf, but you have the ability to work with us and really craft the message with us that we're going to be taking to your vendors. So how does the paperless program actually work? So the way that this works is that there's no programming changes that you have to do with QAD. What you'll do, just like you do today, you'll create your payment file in QAD, and you'll basically just print that file to a network folder. We can also have a driver in QAD, a print driver, so you can just print it to our virtual print driver. What that actually does is our software will then grab that print file, and based on how it's been predefined, it will process payments to your vendors based on that vendor's preference. So once the print file is generated from QAD, it'll go, okay, for this vendor as an example, maybe the vendor ACOM wants a credit card payment, so that one would process through a credit card. Maybe the next 5 vendors want an ACH electronic payment, so those that get paid with ACH electronic payments get an automatic email remittance to tell them, hey, this is what you're getting paid. Maybe some of them still want paper checks, so some might still print checks. As I mentioned before, if you want us to, we can even print your checks, what we would call e-checks, where we're taking the check printing out of your office. We'll do it, we'll print, and we'll mail them for you. So to you, whether you have 50% are electronic payments and 50% are paper checks, to you everything's going to be electronic because you're not going to have to deal with that anymore. And it will also handle the foreign wires as well. And as I mentioned earlier too, there's a vendor portal where you can use that, or your vendors can use that to look at payment history and view the actual e-remittance from those payments. So one thing I want to stress is that there's no work on your part. The solution's offered in really 2 different flavors. It can be an on-premise solution if you so desire, where the software would be sitting on your server. You would process the electronic payments, or you would print the paper checks directly on your premise. We also have a SaaS-based or a hosted version of it where everything is outside of your building, so you just access it through a browser or through a website, and you don't have to maintain any hardware. And as I mentioned before, we'll also print the paper checks for you for those vendors that don't take an electronic form of payment, so you can be 100% paper-free within this process. So the vendor enrollment service is performed by ACOM. Again, this is a very key part of the whole process, and it's going to be, as I mentioned, it's going to be performed by us. It's going to start with an initial detailed spend analysis for each of the vendors. We'll then create a vendor communication plan with you. We'll put that in writing, and you can review it. And once you've approved it, we'll go ahead and launch the campaign to contact your vendors. And using, as I mentioned, phone calls, emails, letters, we'll handle signing up the vendors into their chosen payment method. We'll also provide ongoing support for vendors if they have questions or if they decide to change, their payment options. So this is not anything that you have to do. We'll do it for you. You'll help us with it in the sense that you'll help us craft the letters and emails and what we're going to say in our phone scripts, but we'll handle all the outreach for you. So I know this probably sounds really great. You know, we're going to do all this stuff, and I talked about that this is going to be free. So I'm sure the question you're asking is how are we going to do this? How are we going to give this to you for free? And how's ACOM actually going to make their money? So let me kind of explain how it really works. So when we start to convert your vendors to electronic payment, this is the typical spread we see. About 50 to 60% of the vendors are going to go ahead and take an ACH electronic payment. What we're actually counting on, you see the little star there, is we're actually counting on about 10 to 20% of your vendors taking what's called a virtual card payment. This is a one-time credit card payment. So some of your vendors are already accepting V-card payments today from other customers. So if they're already doing that, there's no reason why they wouldn't accept them from you. So we're figuring that 10 to 20% are going to take those virtual cards. So these are the vendors that we're going to target first. When the vendor takes the credit card payment, what actually happens is the vendor is paying what's called an interchange fee, and this is typically 2 to 3% of the transaction cost. And this is how ACOM is going to get paid. We get a portion of that fee back from MasterCard, and that's how we get paid. So if we can get 10 to 20% of your vendor community to take this virtual card based on your vendor annual total spend, we can justify giving you the solution at no charge. So we're really going to make an investment in you, and once we approve you for the program, even if we don't get the 10 to 20% that we're thinking we're going to get to take the V cards, that's not your concern. I mean, we'll absorb any difference. You still get all the benefits from day one. What we're looking at this is really a long-term investment for ACOM. It might take us years to recoup, our investment, but we're looking at this again from a long-term standpoint, and you're going to get the benefits right out of the gate. And as I mentioned, we'll take any of the electronic payments. So we're estimating 20 to 25% on the bottom are going to still get checks. So for those people that still get paper checks, if you want us to, we'll print those checks for you. You'll access the solution through a browser. You don't even have to deal with any paper. Or if you so desire, some companies do want to do that printing of the checks, and how you certainly can do that. But in the other method, that would provide you 100% paper free if we did the check printing for you. That's basically how it works. And what we'll do is, initially we'll get a vendor file from you, and we'll do an analysis at no charge to show you, okay, this is what you're spending, this is what your annual vendor spend is, and based on that we can say, oh, yes or no, you're approved into the program. And again, if we approve you, you're good to go. You don't have to worry about anything else. If we don't get the results we think we're going to get based on our analysis, that's not your concern. So just to summarize, the paperless payment solution, it's a comprehensive program that includes all the vendor services. Again, the vendor outreach is a key component to this thing, because a lot of times, companies, what we find is that even companies that already have the technology to do electronic payments, they're still kind of stuck around that 20 to 25% taking electronic payments, and that kind of reflects the poll that we did earlier in the presentation. That most of you were under 20%, and the missing link a lot of times is the actual outreach to get the vendors to switch. So we'll handle that for you, and again, our goal is to get 75% to go to electronic payment, some form of electronic payment. And we'll provide the full technology to you, whether it's our hosted solution or on-premise if you so desire. You have the ability to go 100% paperless, and if you qualify, it is 100% free. So a little bit about ACOM. ACOM's been in business. This is actually our 33rd year. We provide document, process, and automation management solutions and payment solutions like we discussed today to clients worldwide. I have about 4,000 customers around the world, 200 employees. Our corporate office is in Long Beach, California. We also have offices in Atlanta and Phoenix as well. We have our payment solution that we talked about today. Other things we offer, we have a document management accounts payable automation solution for QAD that we provide. We also have a document output solution that's laser printed, emailed, and faxed forms, and an EDI solution as well. And as Mike had mentioned, we've been a QAD partner since 1996. So I know coming up is the QAD Event Explore in Chicago. Strategic and ACOM have kind of a unique event that we're hosting at the Explore show. So Mike, I don't know if you want to jump on and talk a little bit about this.
Yeah. So anybody that's going to Explore, or even if you're in the greater Chicago area and like to go to this event, we'd love to host you. So we're renting out the Willis Tower, which is everybody knows is the Sears Tower. We're going to have dinner and drinks and you know, appetizers, and it's going to be fantastic. So highly recommend. If you haven't received an invite, please reach out to us, and we'd love to see you at the event.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, please reach out, and we'd be happy to have you join us. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. I know we had scheduled about a half an hour for this, and we're right there. So if you had entered any questions, let me take a look now and see if any questions have come in to the to this. I don't see any questions here. Let me check the chat box here. Okay, it looks like I don't see any questions here. Okay, I don't see.
Well, David, you were probably so thorough. You were so thorough in your information that there's no questions at this time. But you know, obviously, you have the contact information for David. Please reach out directly to David. Also, Laura's email address is listed there, or just go out to the strategic website, and we'd be happy to follow up with anything you have. Hopefully you find benefit in these types of events, and you know, again, would like to thank ACOM for being here today, and David for doing an excellent presentation. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your time, and have a great day.